let me kick off the meeting. Welcome to the first meeting of the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Development. It's our first meeting for the year. I hope that everyone had a good break. And for those that I haven't seen yet, Happy New Year. The purpose of the meeting today is to consider the initial negotiating mandate of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, the Western Cape, in regards to the Public Service Commission bill. Colleagues, keep in mind that the online rules of the House applies here in this meeting as well. So please, if keep the nub of it is that you keep yourself muted and put up your hand if you want to speak. But those rules apply. Colleagues, we're going to have a response to the public hearings that we have from the Public Service Commission today. We will then have a briefing by the legal advisor in this regard. And then the various people addressing us will be excusing themselves, and we will be then considering the initial negotiating mandate as a committee. This is Kamish Ahmad. Are there any apologies that we've received?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, no apologies for this. Thank you.
Okay, your sound is a little bit soft now. It's not as good as it was earlier.
Okay, there was no apologies.
Right, colleagues, so there was no apologies, and I will then give an opportunity for the members to introduce themselves. I'm Thomas Walters. I'm chairperson of the Committee for Premier and Constitutional Development.
Good morning, Chairperson and colleagues, and to the officials. I'm Memory Boyson, and I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning, Chairperson, and to the officials. I'm Khalid Sayed, and I'm also a member of this committee. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Benedicta van Minnen, and I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Donita Stevens, and I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning, Brett Heron, member of the committee.
Good morning, everyone. Peter Johnson, member of this committee.
Right, colleagues, then I'm going to give an opportunity for the Public Service Commission to introduce themselves, and also the legal advisor, so they can just introduce themselves.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members. My name is Ashley Searle. I'm the Western Cape Commissioner for the Public Service Commission. Please accept my apologies for not activating my camera. We've been we're busy relocating from our offices in Golden Acre, and as you know, it's under huge renovation. So our IT systems are playing up this morning, and I had challenges earlier on where I activated the camera and it affected the reception. So please excuse me for that. Thank you, Chair.
Morning, Honorable Chairperson. My name is Advocate Shukrat Makinde. I'm the head of legal services for the Public Service Commission.
Thank you very much. And then I believe it's also Ramadan Mubarak to all our Muslim members and staff members here. With those words, I want to hand over to the Public Service Commission to address the public hearing comments that were made. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The responses will be dealt with by Advocate Makinde, our Head of Legal Services. We will deal with most or all of the issues that arose, but we might also touch on some of the fundamental issues that arose during other processes, other engagements on the bill, because I think there's one particular one that arises quite consistently, and it will be vital for us to address that. And that issue relates to the view that certain sections of the bill, especially where it relates to the inclusion of municipalities, might border on being unconstitutional. So I think that's a very important area that we need to address, and Advocate Makinde will certainly delve into those issues. We do also want to place on the record, Chair, that we've been very circumspect and responsible with regards to some of the responses that we've received on that particular issue. And we do have a number of legal opinions that were obtained, all saying the same thing. The most recent one was obtained by senior counsel, S.C. Nugatobi, where we asked him specifically to look at the constitutionality of the provisions in the bill that relate to the inclusion of municipalities. I think we may have made that available to the committee, but my head of legal services would be able to confirm that. And we'll speak a little bit about what the opinion provides. But we do accept that it's merely an opinion. It is a view that's expressed. It's not a judgment. It's not precedent. It's not case law. But we think that it provides the summary and the position of the Public Service Commission as far as that particular issue is concerned, Chair. We will also then respond to some of the other issues that were raised during the public engagements that we had on the bill. So without any further ado, Chairperson, I will request Advocate Makinde to begin her presentation or submission with regards to the responses. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly share my screen, if that will be fine.
We will wait. It's not a problem.
I don't know if I'm giving a sharing right. I cannot see that the sign is blurred, is not allowing me to share. So I need to be given sharing right from.
We'll wait until that is sorted out. This is a patient committee, don't worry. So take your time and let's sort that out.
Right. I hope Wasima can hear me. All right, now she's giving me the right. Okay, thank you, Chair. I think you can see my screen now. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
I'm sharing the document. Thank you. Okay, so this is the response that we have provided to the questions that we have submitted. I think the first one has to deal with the jurisdiction of the PSC over local government. Our response generally is saying that the issue of the mandate starts from section 195 of the Constitution, which specifically talks about the constitutional values. And those constitutional values, as we all know, under section 1952, applies to administration. It applies to administration in every sphere of government, organs of state, and public enterprise. So looking at that, the PSC mandate is to promote these values across public administration and the public service. And that we can see right from the reading of section 1961 itself, which creates a single public service commission for the Republic. This is also obvious when you look at section 1962, where it talks about the commission is independent and must be impartial and must exercise its powers and perform its functions without fear or favor or prejudice. I think what I want to point out is in the interest of the maintenance of effective and efficient public administration. So that element to say in the interest of effective and efficient public administration is basically covering the essence of section 195 as in total, and that is the purpose of the PSC. So in doing that, the PSC regulates itself looking at the Constitution, the funding values of the Constitution itself. In Section 1, the principle of cooperative governance, and in relation to that, we recognize the role of the Labor Relations Act and many other legislations, including the PFMA. If we talk about the law that is actually dealing with the establishment of public administration, it is still a legislation in the pipeline, which is a PAMA Act, which is dealing with that under the DPSA. So our reading of Section 196 is always to be read with Section 195. Now, that is what we have just discussed, what 196.2 says. Then the commission is independent and its effectiveness is safeguarded by 196.3, which requires other organs of state through legislative and other measures to assist and protect the commission to ensure the independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness of the commission. And that prohibits any person or organ of state from interfering with the functioning of the commission. The reason why we're bringing this to your attention is that today we want to use legislation to enhance the role that the PSC plays across the board. We want to use legislation to enable the PSC to implement its full mandate. And that should also be read as in using legislative measures, legislation and other measures to assist and protect the commission. I think it is very important that the legislature should assist and protect the commission and to ensure its dignity, impartiality, and all of that. We know the purpose of our bill. 1, to establish the PSC Secretariat. 2, deal with the process of appointment of commissioners. 3, to repeal our Public Service Commission Act of 1997 and replace it with this Public Service Commission Bill of 2023 that is currently before you, honorable members. And 4 is to ensure that we capacitate the PSC and give it truth. Some people call it truth, some people give it effectiveness, because some of the reports and all of that over the years, they are just being ignored, and we want to make sure that those mandates are stronger and they are being able to be implemented across the 3 spheres of government, including public enterprises. Now, 1964E, F, and all of that set out the powers and functions of the commission. If you look at it, it talks about grievance, it talks about complaints, it talks about giving advice, it talks about monitoring and evaluation. So our functions cut across all those different aspects. So sometimes we just give an advice, we do not demand anything. It is advisory, it is supportive, it is a research, and we give that also to ensure that administration is well established, governance is well done, and all of that. Sometimes we look at giving recommendations, and our recommendations is not only in line with 1964D, it should be read in line with Section 195, which is what this particular bill is saying, that when you are giving recommendations, our recommendations is meant to be appropriate remedies, recommend appropriate remedies. But that is not only what we should look at. It is in line with Section 195, which is not limited. So those recommendations have to be in application of effective and efficient public administration and to promote a high standard of professional ethics, as in Section 196.2. So that is what we are putting in here for clarity purposes. We also want to recognize the fact that there is a 196G, which allows the PSC to exercise or perform additional powers or functions prescribed by an Act of Parliament. This Act of Parliament was required in terms of the Constitution, because if you look at 196.2, it says the Commission must be regulated by national legislation. When it talks about the role of the PSA, it immediately said it must be regulated by national legislation, which is this national legislation that we are dealing with. When you look at the appointments of commissioners, it goes on to say the commission must also be regulated by a national legislation, which is this very same Public Service Commission Act that we are dealing with. And then it goes further to say to exercise or perform additional powers and functions prescribed by an Act of Parliament, giving effect to the fact that anything that will allow the PSC to do its job and to be able to be more effective, to be more able to assist the country in terms of good governance and promotion of ethical values and professionalization, when it is in an Act of Parliament, that should also be looked at to enhance the role of the PSC. That is why we are bringing this legislation to you. Now, so in accordance with Section 1962 of the Constitution, we are saying this commission must be further regulated by that Public Service Commission Act of 1997, which we already have, and we are now looking into that. Having read all of that and understood that, we've seen a lot of case law that has also clarified that the role of the PSC is to work within public administration. And we have submitted a legal opinion from Advocate Unokai Toby, which is dated 31 October 2025, for your attention. If you look at that, you will see that towards the end, in paragraph 39 of that opinion, he was talking about a case law which was confirmed by the Constitutional Court in ex parte chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly in the recertification of the amended text of the Constitution. He said the PSC mandate is distinct from the Auditor General, whose primary role is to ensure that there is openness, accountability, and propriety in the use of public funds. The role of the PSC is to focus on personnel practices and the conduct of employees within public administration. That is what the court have said in that identification of roles, because it talked about the role of the Auditor General, it talked about the role of the public protector. For example, it says a key difference between the PSC and the public protector is that while the PSC has an important supervisory and watchdog function, unlike the public protector, a good deal of it will be of a routine or advisory nature involving ongoing monitoring and reporting. Then it says the PSC mandate is distinct from the Auditor General, whose primary role is to ensure that there is openness, accountability, and propriety in the use of public funds. The PSC focuses in some personnel practices and the conduct of employees within public administration. So our bringing this bill to you is influenced by a number of court cases that have also confirmed the role of the PSC in different ways. Another important thing that made us to start looking at our business case and coming up with what do we do, how do we enhance the role of the PSC across the public service and public administration is that if you look at chapter 10 itself, the heading is public administration. And it was meant to deal with the entire public administration. That's why I started with section 195 and the constitutional values. And in that section 196, it then talks, 195, sorry, it talks about the legislation regulating public administration may differentiate between different sectors, administrations, or institutions. So recognition will be given to the way those sectors have administered, but it still has to be within one umbrella where we look at a single public service commission for the Republic. So having understood that section 195 and what it wants the PSC to do, we read section 196 and we note 197. 197 is a section that is actually administered by the Department of Public Service and Administration, which is basically looking at the public service. And that was what we used to work with them on. And we are moving away from that because all of this, the whole of chapter 10 used to be the role of the PSC until the policy directive, which then says the PSC takes 197. We are continuing with 196 and 195. And in light of that, Parliament then took this resolution in 2011, which then says that the PSC must implement its full mandate across the three spheres of government, organs of state, and public enterprise, and to report to the relevant executive authority. You will note that in the Constitution, the PSC is accountable to the National Assembly, but it also reports to the legislature and the relevant executive authority. To that extent, if you say where is local government is part of the three spheres of government. It is an organ of state in terms of section 195. The values apply to them. We report to the relevant executive authority. And in that case, if it is municipality, the relevant executive authority will be the municipal council or the mayor, depends on each environment that we find them. So for the public enterprises, we note that the executive authority will be the shareholder department that established the public entity, because we know that all these public entities, they are performing public functions on behalf of a particular department, either in local government, provincial government, or national government. They are all established to implement and deliver public service service delivery to the people in their environment, in their specialized areas and all of that. So the model is for them to deliver an effective and efficient service on the mandate of government in appropriate circumstances. The board for the governance of the entity will be the accounting authority in line either with the PFMA, MFMA, and the like. The PSA bill in 2023 is aligned to this policy shift to institutionalize a single public service across the three spheres of government, just like the Public Administration Management Amendment Bill and the professionalization framework for the public sector. Now, the president has reinforced this when it said in a State of the Nation address in 2021 that only a capable, efficient, ethical, and developmental-oriented state can deliver on the commitment to improve the lives of the people of this country. The public service and public administration, they must be staffed by men and women who are professional, skilled, selfless, and honest. And we hope that we will be able to assist this country to achieve this beautiful objective. In the State of the Nation address of the president in 2025, he then gave a clear marching orders to the PSC when it says, we need a state that is capable and competent, which is underpinned by a professional public service. South Africans want a state that treats all people with dignity, humility, and respect. A state with leaders who are prepared to serve our people with complete dedication, and public servants who are ethical, skilled, and properly qualified. So we went on to then say the PSC commissioners' recruitment should also be professionalized. So in our bill, we introduced the element of recommended qualifications, so that because our commissioners are almost at the level of DGs in terms of salaries and so on, or let me say heads of department. So the requirement for appointment of heads of departments and NQF level 9. In this one, we have recommended an NQF level 8 with appropriate experience of about 8 years management experience to make sure that the people that are appointed are also fit for purpose and to be part of the selection bodies, and to make sure that the legislatures and parliaments is able to assist us with top level candidates. They also go through their vetting processes and to make sure that they are fit and proper people. Now, same will then be done with the issues of municipal managers. We want to make sure that they are also professionalized, and we will be looking at how their appointments are done, because there's a panel that the PSC is looking into making sure that it assists wherever senior management positions are involved, and also looking at the performance management of all the top executives to make sure that they are well aligned. So we seek to promote, as the PSC, meritocracy and ethical disposition in the public service and public administration, and in line with Section 195 and 196 of the Constitution. Now, talking about the PSC mandate over public entities, we know that the PSC is a constitutional institution that is established in terms of Chapter 10 of the to provide oversight on public administration and public service. If you look at Section 195 and 196, there is a joint use of the word public administration in some places it's public service. It is all embracing. And this is just semantics, and we shouldn't be seen as something so different, because the employees working in the public entities, doing government function, delivering services to the community, they are public servants. We in the national and provincial government, we are public servants. The ones working in the municipalities, they are public servants. A combination of all of them makes the public administration. So the purpose and the intention is what should be looked at. And that was well identified and clarified in the legal opinion of Advocate Onukaitobi that we have submitted for your consideration. So all public entities are executing state functions, and they are created by proclamations by the president's minutes on the request of a particular minister. Departments to implement part of the mandate of the relevant government department, provincial government departments, or public entities. So these public entities, they all report to an executive authority. And normally we say those executive authorities, they are shareholders in those businesses, because they are the ones that are establishing them. So they receive a budget from the state to execute state mandated function, and they must have a strategic plan or annual report depending on the type of or class of entity. And most of them are audited by the Auditor General. And they are also subjected to the public protector as well as the public service from now going forward. So the state is the shareholder and owner of the public entities. So employees in state enterprise or public entities are paid, like we've said, and public entities is established to execute the mandate of the state. Therefore, those constitutional values, when the parliament took a resolution that we must implement it, they were well aware of all of this. It was a big meeting. They discussed it extensively. The resolution was taken that PSC, with the state of things in this country, you need to start implementing your functions fully. So these values apply to them, organs of states, and public enterprise, and the three spheres of government. Now, so as the PSC, wherever state funding is used to provide services that is in the interest of the community and aligned to the duties of the state. If it is aligned to the duties of the state, where taxpayers' money is used, then the PSC will have an oversight mandate. And it's in good governance, the promotion of an ethical, professional, and developmental state. So the PSC, we call it, it's an institutional, it's an oversight constitutional institution that reports to Parliament. And I think this is very important. We don't have an executive. Our work is to look after the work and oversight on the executive, on the ministers, on the MECs, on the mayors, and what they are doing in their respective portfolios. We report to Parliament to assist Parliament with their oversight and the legislatures. That's why we have one commissioner that is appointed by each legislature. These legislatures and the provinces, they also establish the municipalities for the entire republic. So they are covered under those legislations. And even SALGA and all of that, their inputs are taken into account in the legislatures, and they make inputs there. So the provincial commissioner of the PSC will be looking after the province and the municipalities in that province, and then report to the relevant legislature and the relevant executive authority, which will be the municipal council or the mayor, in order to assist it with its oversight and to give you information that will allow you to be able to ensure that the executive is functioning properly and the government is run adequately. The PSC assists public enterprises also to promote effective administration and report on the relevant executive authority where the relevant executive authority needs its assistance. Apart from even reporting to the legislature, reporting to the municipal council, reporting to Parliament, even if an executive authority calls the PSC and say, I have a problem in my organization, can you assist us? We do give those advice. We do the monitoring and evaluation report, which we do give, and we report to Parliament and the legislation at least once annually on the oversight and the reports and the recommendations and the directions and everything that we have done, so that where there are challenges, we bring it to your attention and you are able to make the executive to account on that in that regard. We also assist even the executives themselves where it is necessary. We do this even on our own accord or on receipt of complaints to investigate and evaluate application of personnel and public administration practices. And I want us to note that highlighted area, which is saying either of its own accord or on receipt of any complaints to investigate and evaluate the application of personnel and public administration practices. That is very important. Public administration practices sometimes even include looking at SCM issues where there is non-compliance to processes and so on, and we do that. And then we report to that relevant executive authority and legislature. So the PSC mandate on local government, if we were to just talk a little bit more about it, which we are saying that there is a single public service commission for the Republic in line with that section 1961 of the Constitution. Commission is independent, very important. That is why it is a constitutional body. Even ourselves in our bill, we now built a clause to say, even if you have an interest in any matter or something that will amount to conflict of interest, you must recuse yourself, because that independence is very important, and we must be neutral and impartial, and we must exercise and perform its powers and perform its functions without fear. It's very important. That's why we want our commissioners not to be afraid. We want their term of office to be more or less guaranteed so that they can work without fear, favor, or prejudice in that interest of maintenance of effective and efficient public administration and a high standard of professional ethics in the public service. Now, Section 196E requires the PSC to report, as I think we've dealt with that. What is important for us is to provide an evaluation of the extent to which the values and principles set out in Section 195 are complied with. So when we do all of this, if somebody is not using the PFMA effectively and efficiently, we will report and provide an evaluation. If somebody is not complying with recruitment policies, we will report. If somebody is not doing skills development and there is a lot of gaps, we will report on that evaluation of the extent to which the values and principles set out in Section 195 are complied with. Because if I were to mention some of those values, you will see 195 1G, 1H. It says good human resource management and career development practices to maximize human potential must be cultivated. That's one thing we will report on. It says public administration must be accountable. So we will report on that if there is anyone that is not accountable and transparent enough. People's needs must be responded to, and the public must be encouraged to participate in policy making. Those are issues that we will be looking at. It says public administration must be broadly representative of the South African people with employment and personnel management practices based on ability, objectivity, fairness, and the need to redress the imbalances of the past to achieve broad representation. That will also be looked at. So if you look at these values, they are so important and they are so critical in how we do our evaluation to this extent of which these values are complied with, and the report that we bring to your attention. Over and above all of this, the PSA will act and investigate any state institution in line with its own establishment act or legislation that is an act of parliament, because the PSA bill or PSA act or provincial legislation, they are all acts of parliament, or a municipal council laws. Remember, when we are working, we don't work only with the PSA Act. We work with the Labor Relations Act. We work even with the municipal council bylaws itself. When the law says, or the municipal manager's role in terms of recruitment, we will say, your own law, your own municipal systems act says you must do 1, 2, 3 in recruitment. Have you complied with that? Why is it that we have recruited the wrong caliber? Why is it that this is it? That's exactly the role of the PSA. So we are not limited to only the Public Service Commission Act. We implement and reinforce all these other legislations. So we exercise or perform the additional powers of functions prescribed by an act of parliament, which is why even in this legislation, we could include other things that will enable the PSC to work. When it's an act of parliament, then we should then be able to carry it forward. Of critical importance is to know that the mandate of the PS is clear and unambiguous. Some people say it is not, it is ambiguous. That is a selective reading. If you select and say this is public service, there's also a lot of public administration. And overall, the whole essence of Chapter 10 is public administration. So that selective picking is not correct. So the mandate is clear and it's unambiguous in terms of the Constitution, and all of this must be evaluated and implemented in light of the supremacy of the Constitution that is in Section 1 of the Constitution. So the PSA oversight over local government is in harmony with the implementation framework or the professionalization of the public sector, and that public sector includes the public service and public administration. Chapter 7 of the Constitution deals with local government spheres, which consists of municipalities, and it says these municipalities must be established for the whole of the territory of the Republic. That's what it says. Now, a municipality has its own right to govern on its own initiative the local government affairs of its community, subject to national and provincial legislation as provided in that Section 1513. The PSC does not do the work of the municipality. It is an oversight body that assists with reporting, monitoring and evaluation, complaints management, grievance management, advice, and all of that. So we don't step into the work of the community or the municipality. So they will have every right to govern on their own initiative without any interference. So we believe that the mandate is clear and there is no confusion. Section 1557 of the Constitution says that the national government, subject to Section 44, and the provincial government have the legislative and executive authority to see to the effective performance by municipalities. The question is, are they doing that? Well, that is why we have the Department of Local Government. We have it both national, we have the ministerial cluster. Are they doing that? So some of the things is to look at the leverages, to look at the linkages, and to try and identify the gaps and assist to build synergy so that you find that there is capacity, there is support adequately. We know that the funding of municipalities come from different sources, some from budget, from their own revenue rates and all of that. But there are different classes of municipalities. But we must ensure that in line with the matters listed in Schedule 4 and 5, which regulate the exercise by municipalities of their executive authority referred to in Section 1561, that is there alignment and synergy where it is required. Section 1563 of the Constitution states that subject to Section 151, a bylaw that conflicts with national or provincial legislation it's invalid, and we can then look at the rest. Section 164 deals with other matters. Any matter concerning local government not dealt with in the Constitution may be prescribed by national legislation or by provincial legislation within the framework of national legislation. The National Parliament and the Director General has raised concerns about the rampant governance failures in various municipalities and their impact on service delivery. We are not saying that this is only in the municipalities. It is also in the provincial government that there is a lot of problem. But the area of the municipalities is becoming a great concern, and that's why we have the Zondo Commission and all of them, when they were saying, where is the PSC? When all of these things are happening, we now have the Maglanda Commission looking at the SAPS, and across the board, if you look, there's so much problem going on. So the PSC is constitutionally enjoined to address some of the persistent governance and public administration failures, which lead to poor or no service delivery. The PSC oversight is aimed at looking at providing support to municipalities to see where and how best to improve efficiency at local government and to address service delivery needs. Therefore, to align the PSC to the implementation of its full mandate in line with Section 196 and 195 of the Constitution, the PSC is in the process of repealing its PSC Act of 1997 and promulgating this new bill of the PSC Bill 2023. Because while we are repealing our PSC Act of 1997, specifically because it's only talking about national and provincial government, but which is not correct. Hence, we have to repeal it, and with the other things that we have listed as a purpose of the bill. So in line with Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan, which prescribes that a constitutional body must be independent in form and in practice. Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan. We cannot be a constitutional body and then we report to an executive. There is always this confusion that the PSC is reporting to the DPSA, which is not correct. The PSC actually exists before the DPSA. The PSA came out of the PSC to do a different function so that it's aligned to the executive, and the PSA has nothing to do with the executive, so that it reports to Parliament as an independent constitutional body. So it is against this background that the Public Service Commission must establish its administrative support as its own PSC secretariat. So currently we have the Office of the Public Service Commission, which is a government department established in terms of the Public Service Act. We are saying that OPSC, Office of the Public Service Commission, must move by function shift into the PSC Act itself and become the PSC Secretariat. This will improve the PSC independence and impartiality so that our colleagues in the OPSC or the Secretariat of the PA will not have any vested interest or conflict of interest with the policies that they are reviewing for the public service, and they need to move out. And they are supposed to be dealing with public administration. So they have to be a secretariat, just like it is in other Chapter 9 institutions. They all have secretariat. None of them is part of the national government. So we have to take the PSC out of that system. So this action will clear all the wrong perception and negative myths about the PSC. The PSC comments on the public submission. The PSC notes the public comments and appreciates and value them. It is crucial that we respond to some of the comments which, in our view, are not factual. And it is important to know that the PSC is not a political functionary. And I think that is where some people are getting wrong. It's one of the reasons we are establishing the PSC Secretariat outside so that it's not aligned to any executive power. Strictly PSC, 14 commissioners established in terms of the Constitution. They report to those different legislatures, Parliament, and the Municipal Council. So it's important that the OPSC must be aligned to the role that the PSC is performing so that there is no misalignment. So it is important to know that the PSC is not a political functionary and therefore does not advance the interests of any political party or institution. The assertion by some commentators on this aspect must then be rejected. All that the PSC bill seeks to do, and I would even say that to reject that very contention, we even said if somebody was a political office bearer, there must be a cooling off period, which was a clause that was introduced in the Parliament when we were debating this bill by the Portfolio Committee, that we don't want politicians to be appointed as commissioners. If they were politicians, they must not be any office bearer, they must not have any political alignment, and they must have a 2-year cooling off period, because we want that independence to be clear, and they must not carry that political mandate. So it seeks to achieve it to enforce its impartiality and neutral position in order to fulfill its mandate, as defined in Section 196 of the Constitution and Section 195 in the promotion of the constitutional values and principles. The first question was SEER, which we call Socioeconomic Impact Assessment. This Socioeconomic Impact Assessment is a requirement of the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. At the PSC, we did our business case for the bill, and then they want a SEER. We gave them the business case and the SEER. They are the ones that will evaluate the SEER, which is the Socioeconomic Impact Assessment, and say, what is the purpose of this bill? Is it going to achieve public good? Is it for good governance? And if they will then decide and approve, and they issue a certificate to say, yes, the purpose of this bill is aligned to the National Development Plan, it's aligned to the purpose of government, it is aligned to the mandate, and they issued our certification for that. Because if you don't have certification from them, you cannot present a bill in cabinet, and you cannot present this bill in the portfolio committee, because they had to be present, and they then present their own certification to the portfolio committee by themselves. So the portfolio committee and in each of the legislators were presented. So this was then well discussed under the institutional practice review. So that's why in our presentation, we always have that clause. We talked about institutional practice review to give a background. So DPME therefore issued the certificate of compliance for the CS of the bill. DPME presented to the portfolio committee on public service and administration during the public hearings the requirement of SEER and how the SEER for the public service bill was met and was approved by the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. The representative from the Office of the Premier Western Cape were also present, where this DPME presented to the portfolio committee. Now, the costing of the establishment of the PSC Secretariat, it's included in the explanatory memorandum that is attached to the PSC bill, and it states the rationale for aligning the PSC Secretariat with the PSC. So we are just looking at function shift, and we will be making some minimal cost here and there to establish the Secretariat, which is clearly attached to the explanatory memorandum of the bill. Benchmark studies with Chapter 9 constitutional institutions nationally, which are meant to strengthen democracy in South Africa and other similar organizations internationally, were done, and we did include that in our institutional practice review, which forms part of our presentation. The PSC is therefore is independent and impartial constitutional institution and is accountable to Parliament and must report on its activities and the performance of its functions to the National Assembly at least once a year. Therefore, it is important that the PSC guarantees that independence and protects its integrity and ensure that the PSC is supported administratively by that independent secretariat. So currently we are saying, as part of our institutional practice review, we realized that the PSC is the only constitutional body that's supported by a national government department, which is now called the Office of the Public Service Commission. And that was established in terms of the Public Service Act. So our bill is saying that will be removed. It's in the schedule of our bill. We will be removed from the Public Service Act, not as OPSC. We will now be recognized in the Public Service Commission Act as a secretariat of the PSC. Also, the PSC itself is what will be listed as a constitutional body in Schedule 1 of the PFMA. So in all our presentations, we did explain this, and we are doing this in line with that Apex Court decision in the Independent Electoral Commission, IEC, versus Langebad Municipality, where it says that the importance of the principle of the independence of constitutional entities, because we are not a public entity. People tend to mix us up. Say, no, the minister must appoint an acting commissioner. No, it's not a public entity. The minister don't appoint anyone. It's done through the legislatures and parliament. So the independence of the constitution and these entities should be and manifestly be seen to be outside of government. So it's important that we work outside of government as much as possible, as declared in that case law. Now, the next question was inadequate detail and guidance regarding inspections and investigations. Inspections and investigations are different processes. Inspections are done as compliance activities or part of our routine mandate of the commission. However, investigations happen at the instance of a perceived concern or request. We do inspections as part of an investigation. So that we inspect documents, we do inspections in loco, but an investigation, it's in itself an investigation of a grievance or an investigation of a complaint. which could be on own initiative or on receiving a complaint. So the PSA has the authority, therefore, to initiate such a process upon receipt of that complaint or on own accord after identification of a specific concern. The inspection and investigation power is in line with Section 1964 of the Constitution and the current provision of the PSA Act, because even in our current legislation, we do conduct inspections and we do investigations. So the bill merely confirms this authority and extends its provision to local government and public entities. So we took the current legislation and the way it is, and then we just extended that to local government and public entities. An inspection is it's regulated process which may be done on inspection of documents or the conducting of a physical in-local visit to a site. We do go to police stations. There was a report we did on police stations at the time and the state of affairs, where how do they deal with the community when people arrive. We look at gender violence issues. We've done a report on the mortuaries. Why is it that the ballistics and all of those things, the reports don't come out and then the investigations get delayed? We did a report and we look at all of those things. Those are inspections that we do in local, and we do our investigations in those processes. So the power of the PSA include the authority to also subpoena a person to attend a meeting, but we use the word summons. Some people are arguing that it should be subpoena. We use the word summons because summons is what is used in the Constitution for Parliament when you summon people. We are not a court, so we do not want to use that word subpoena, but it is meaning the same thing and it is relevant. So the PSA investigates where there are grievances or complaint lodged. The PSA also has that authority to conduct so-called own accord investigation. These are done in cases where the PSA has identified issues. The issues investigated must, however, be linked to the PSA mandate and function as prescribed in Chapter 10 of the Constitution. So the PSA conducts service delivery inspections at public institutions, like I'm saying, like public hospitals, police stations, as an example. These inspections are focused on evaluating service standards and the compliance therewith. All of these are well clarified in the current version of the bill. The powers to conduct investigations, conduct inquiries, issue subpoenas, or issue summons are provided for in the current version of the PSA Act. These powers and functions are thus included in the PSA bill for continuity. The powers of the PSA are thoroughly debated and necessary inputs were considered through all the public hearings. We must remember our public hearing consultation process started as far back as 2015. That's when we started this bill. So we've been through so many clusters of the cabinet meetings. We've been through so many. We also published this bill twice. We gazetted it. We also went to FOSAD. We've been to SALGA several times, and we've been on this consultation process for a very long time. And we've tried to build in as many of the inputs as possible. So it must be noted that in addition to the statutory provisions, the PSA has also has rules. What we do is these rules in a normal public service department, they are called regulations, and they provide operational mechanism for the implementation of the PSA functions. The rules are necessary since the act or the bill cannot function all on the administrative process required for the implementation of the function. So these rules, they help in order to clarify where there is clarity required on an ongoing basis, because the process of making a rule is not as stringent as the legislation. So you use the rules to give effect, to clarify, so that it is read as part of the legislation once implemented. So there will be quite a number of rules that will be developed, even on how to deal with grievances in the municipalities and all of that. They will all be included in our rules. The Act actually says all of that must be done within the first 12 months after passing the Act. All these rules must be developed so that it's aligned and giving effect to the legislation to make smooth implementation possible. PSA Bill of 2023 was then drafted by the Chief State Law Advisor after it was thoroughly reviewed. After everything we've done, it was submitted to the Chief State Law Advisor. It was actually submitted to the Chief State Law Advisor 3 times, and they made input until it was certified, because without their certification that the bill is aligned to the Constitution, it cannot be presented in Parliament. So the bill has been certified. When we were at the Portfolio Committee in Parliament, the Chief State Law Advisor was in all the meetings, all the public hearings. They participated. So the bill that we have today is a joint effort by the public, by the Portfolio Committee, the Chief State Law Advisor, the Parliamentary Legal Advisor, and the Legal Services, and a number of inputs. So we drafted this bill together. They went through it line by line. So the drafting style is done in line with the standard practice in the country. The PSB is aligned with the correct drafting style as certified by the Chief State Law Advisor. So the GSTEC Governance and Ministerial Cluster also supports and approved the PSB bill that was presented to Cabinet. Cabinet approved the bill for gazetting, for public comments. Cabinet also approved the policy directive for the PSB bill and approved that the PSC bill should be tabled in Parliament. And those policy directives are that it must extend to local government, must extend to public entities, that there must be a PSC secretariat, and all of that. Those are clear policy directives aligned with the resolution of Parliament that was already taken in 2011. So we all contributed and we drafted that bill to make sure it is aligned. So these changes were incorporated and accepted. That draft that we presented to the National Assembly, which is adopted, is the one that we are presenting to your good selves, honorable members. The manner in which the PSB 2023 is drafted is in accordance with prevailing drafting practice, conforms with the principle of plain language and drafting, among others. We also got several legal opinions to make sure that this bill is aligned to the Constitution. Now, in terms of the long title, the Public Service Act of 1995 amended is an act that is managed by the Department of Public Service and Administration in line with Section 197. And we want that to be clear. We are not part of the DPSA. The Public Service Commission, on the other hand, does not have an executive minister. PSC, I'm sorry about that. I just want to go back. The implementation of the PSC mandate and local government will therefore be implemented progressively based on availability of resources, and it is hoped that this the full mandate will be implemented within 3 years of the PSC bill having been passed into an act. So we're hoping that we will be able to get additional resources, we'll be able to build for some of our work, and we'll also be able to seek some donor funding where it is safe and will not conflict with our mandate. That the proposed amendment relating to local and public entity legislation must be removed based on the argument. That is what they say, that the PSC should only limit itself to public service. That is not correct. The PSC is meant for public administration as well as the public service. So we have said a lot about that. I do not know whether I need to actually repeat this, but I think what is important is we must look at that legal opinion of Advocate Unokaitobi and Advocate Michaela Kritzinger, which was dated 31 October. It really helps. Opinion for the PSC concerning the PSB. This opinion is for noting by the Provincial Legislature of Western Cape and consideration. Now, the Betty's Bay Ratepayers Association support the PSB bill, and they say it will assist to improve service delivery for citizens. It will enhance fiscal responsibility to ensure taxpayer funds are used effectively. It will strengthen independence oversight to curb maladministration and corruption, aligned with the constitutional mandate, Section 196 of the Constitution, which is correct because now we are all going to be focusing on curbing that maladministration and strengthen oversight. When we talk oversight, it's not just the oversight of the PS, actually the oversight for the legislature to give you the knowledge, capacity, information to bring the accountability to the executive. The PSC notes and accepts the support of this association as it concludes that the PSC bill is a necessary reform to combat inefficiency, corruption, and poor service delivery by empowering the PSC as a truly independent watchdog. The bill will ensure that taxpayers' money is spent responsibly, public servants are held accountable, citizens receive the service they pay for. The PSC notes the input, however, the PSC mandate does not have any effect on the municipalities and the public entities' independence. The provision of the PSC bill does not infringe any right provided in the Constitution. We also say that collective bargaining will not be affected. Employees have the option. You know, collective bargaining, all of the collective bargaining, whether in the public service, the municipal sector, education, labor relations, poor crew, all of them, they work in the same formula. They will first of all initiate their grievances internally, and when they have exhausted their internal remedies, they have the option of either going to the bargaining council, which in the case of municipality would be SALGBC, or they go to the PSC. That is an option that they have. The employee will opt when they submit their grievance and say, I'm not satisfied, I am filling this column, please refer my dispute to the PSC. Once the employee does that, the EA will then refer that dispute to the PSC as a second leg in the grievance. If there is a grievance where it involves the head of the organization, like maybe the municipal manager against the mayor, of course, you can't lodge your grievance when it is against the mayor. You have to lodge it to the PSC as the head of the. Then we'll look at it. HODs today are also doing the same. If they have a grievance that is against the minister, they lodge directly with the PSC. If there is a case that is so high level and there's no way to refer it within that organization, and it is about whistleblowing, you feel the organization is conflicted, you have the right to come straight to the PSC, and we will protect that whistleblower and we'll attend to those cases with the sensitivity that it deserves. So this is what the PSC bill is all about. It's an option, it's an opportunity to deal with governance without costing our employees nothing. It's free service when it comes to that. So the provision of the PSC bill does not infringe on any right provided in the Constitution. So collective bargaining will not be affected. Employees have the option to after they have exhausted their internal grievance procedures, to refer their grievances to the PSC. The PSC direction and advice are meant to assist the relevant executive authority in managing the administration. PSC reports to the relevant executive authority, and they ask, where is the relevant executive authority? That would be the municipal council. Where is the relevant executive authority in the public entities? It's either the minister or the board, where they are the accounting authority there. As explained above, and the report of the PSC are issued to them for implementation. So during the period of investigation, draft reports are issued to enable institutions to make input before a final report is issued. We always do that so that we get their buy-in and all of that, and then we issue our final report. And if they don't respond, we will also issue our final report. The EA or the accounting officer must revert to the PSC with feedback on the implementation of the recommendations or advice. That is also in our clause 13.1. to say, when we give you recommendations, you must come back to us within 60 days and so on and so forth, so that we are able to know that you are not just folding the report and throwing it away. Because the whole idea is to deal with these grievances at the closest point without escalating too much and clogging the courts, when we could easily resolve it at the administrative level. So case laws have indicated that the recommendation of the PSC must not be ignored, as the PSC is a constitutional institution. So many things that we have included in this bill, they are also guided by recent case laws because we needed their guidance. So to disregard this recommendation will mean a disregard of the Constitution itself. So the PSC issue directions in only very serious cases. This direction of the PSC is binding, and if the EA or the accounting office is unable to implement the directions, they need to take the report on review. What we have added in this bill is that we are not going to issue directions only in 1964D. This must be read with the constitutional values. It does not limit the capacity or ability of the PSC to issue directions on areas of constitutional values where you are nonchalant and you are being unethical, because the promotion of ethical values is very important where this country is at this stage. So the PSC does not deal with complaints of maladministration in relation to the EA or political office bearers. We only deal with administrators. All those ones, if it is relating to a political, it is the public protector that will deal with that in line with the Executive Ethics Act. The PSC is the custodian of good governance. That is our slogan. That is promoting ethical, professional, and developmental public service and public administration. It is about promoting a developmental, ethical public service. The New South Institute supports the bill. It says it represents a pivotal legislative initiative with a dual character. They did make some inputs in terms of we making sure that we are able to monitor and to report on the efficacy as we go along. So it processes a series of long overdue reforms to enhance professionalization and independence of the South African public service. The PSC bill seeks to strengthen PSC institutional autonomy and professionalizing its leadership. It is aligned with the long-term vision of a capable, ethical, developmental state outlined in the National Development Plan. This bill is a constitutional necessity and a national enabler for the broader reform in public administration as recommended by the State Capture Commission's finding. Also, Gauntlet Security Solutions made a presentation to the legislature. They wanted the PSC to look at the issue of bomb threats mitigation in public office buildings like the airport and all of that, given the escalated safety risk faced by public servants, the courts, administrative offices, and other public workplaces. The PSA notes the request and the importance of ensuring that bomb threats are effectively mitigated by the employers in the public office buildings and workplace. However, we do have this Occupational Health and Safety Act, which actually is something that is monitored by the Department of Labor, but as an oversight body, we will also monitor the Department of Labor to make sure that they are also doing their work, and then we may be able to better consider for this request, because those are occupational health and safety issues. This act mandates employers to provide and maintain a work environment that is safe and free from risk for their employees. PSA will, in any case, monitor compliance with all applicable legislation, because we don't monitor only in terms of the Public Service Commission Act. We make enforcement in terms of all acts of parliament within public administration and public service, and oversight on the Department of Labor when it relates to inspections and safety standards of our building and workplaces against all hazards, including the mitigation of bomb threats. Thank you so much. That is the end of our presentation.
Right, colleagues, I'm going to open the floor for any questions or comments from members. If I can have hands, please. I do not see any hands. Right, I'm just from my side, if I'm putting myself down as a speaker, just a couple of comments, and I'm interested in your response. As part of your response to the comments received, and I can also see it contains a lot of responses that were to concerns that would have been raised, well, since 2011, since 2015. If I follow your timeline correctly, you referred to alignment with the National Development Plan. You referred to matters like, consultation with SALGA. You referred to, I think there's a certain amount of time that is spent on collective bargaining, where you specifically make reference to employees. So the thought struck me there. We are, of course, in a new political environment, a GNU environment, which meant that the existing National Development Plan, to which a large extent you are situating your responses as a policy directive, not as part of the constitutional, call it weighing that you gave us. We are in an environment where the National Development Plan is probably under review and will be under review in a new phase of our politics. So to necessarily situate it as an extension of the existing National Development Plan is not necessarily reflective of what it will look like in the future. And similarly, there's huge changes in the composition and the functioning of SALGA that quite possibly will be taking place in the future. So, and also, if I refer to the collective bargaining process and that employees can take at the conclusion of such a process, they can raise matters with the Public Service Commission. That in itself, I don't have a concern with, but there's also something to be said for public entities, municipalities, provinces, national departments, where the employee might want to take a matter to the Public Service Commission as well. To use an example, if a collective bargaining process results in unfunded budgetary impact on municipalities, on state departments, on provincial governments, it can actually create service delivery havoc. If it's only, and it's not afterwards, employees don't have an opportunity to also challenge such a process. So I would like to hear your response to that. And to use an example, we had huge concerns last year when, as part of the impact of collective bargaining elsewhere, there was an impact on the Western Cape budget and very painful cuts had to be made. And the only remedy that exists, and similarly, I can refer to municipalities like Tshwane, Johannesburg, I think all of them were impacted. The only remedy that seems to exist for employers dealing with budgets and policies, we're not dealing with private entities here, we're dealing with organs of the state, would be to go to court. And I noticed that it's only applicable to employers. Yeah, I would love to hear your comment on that. And then secondly, you made reference of the state capture report. Now, while you mentioned that a cooling off period has been accommodated in the legislation, but I don't see anything proactive in terms of any political party that uses decision-making processes outside of the ambit of the law, influencing appointments. Influencing appointments also on the Public Service Commission. It's accommodated. There's an echo of that, but I don't see anything proactive that says anyone that has been found to be appointed or that has substantively been appointed outside of the appointment processes that circumscribed by the law and the Constitution, that there's not a proactive clause that deals with that. The issue of local government, at what point it potentially infringes on the local government, call it constitutional mandate, to me there remains a concern. If you have a policy directive that is not situated in the Constitution, and as you've motivated the matter, you didn't situate it purely in the Constitution, you situated it in past policy frameworks, and the Public Service Commission uses past policy frameworks to assess local governments. At what point is there tension between the constitutional or the different spheres of government, the constitutional imperative that local government or other organs for that matter are outside of the constitution, also the powers are protected. What point is there tension? Because I see that tension potentially arising, and hence our committee's previous views on related legislation that this should be constitutionally tested. And then in terms of investigations and inspections and inquiries, yes, it is independent. Yes, it's in the legislation, but why is the process in itself, the basic process in itself that these investigations are going to be following, why is that not more circumscribed? And I'll give you a bit of background. I used to sit in Parliament very briefly. Actually, I was a stand-in for another member of Parliament when the expropriation bill was being debated. And at one point, there was agreement within the committee that it is actually necessary to have in the legislation that all rules of natural justice needs to be followed in the process of inquiry, investigations, inspections, that it cannot be left open-ended and, in a sense, the buck passed to the aggrieved party to go to court. It's very easy to do anything that can be described as an investigation. If there's disagreement, well, they can go to court. Presumably, part of good governance is preventing the expense and the potential policy bottlenecks of people going to court to find justice. So I hope you were following my comments. Some of it is based on call it personal history and interacting with this type of legislation. But I would love to hear your response.
Thank you, Chairperson, for those comments. It's Ashley Soul speaking. Chair, before I respond to some of those comments and Advocate Makinde, I've noted that our Chairperson of the Public Service Commission Prof. Somadoda Fikeni has joined us. So with your indulgence, if I could ask Prof to perhaps start the responses or with any comments that he wishes to offer the committee at this stage, if that's in order with you, Chairperson.
That is in order with me.
Prof,
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, esteemed members participating in this important meeting. We really appreciate the opportunity given, and I followed very carefully both our presentation and the issues that you've just raised. And again, thanks, Commissioner Sill. I do think that one of the major, at a broad level, challenges that we're facing is the fragmentation of our public administration, which has led to very incoherent and at times contradictory responses to fundamental problems that our people are feeling on the ground. The notion of creating a seamless, harmonized, standardized public service is assisted greatly. It's articulated in the professionalization of public service. It's articulated in this bill in some form, because in this particular case, let me give you an example. In our citizens' outreach, we've been meeting communities which will say the clinic in this municipality is promising to open 24 hours. However, it is only opening until 3 p.m. and there's no medicine, there's nothing. Without encroaching on any other power, because of the nature of PSC, we're able to interface with national department, provincial department, and local municipalities, which we did at Mandeni, and we solved those problems. So it becomes the district development model in action, precisely because of our footprint everywhere. Now, let me come to the issue of the NDP and the GNU that, Chairperson, you have raised. Let's be reminded that when National Development Plan was crafted, it was not a ruling party or one party thing. There was a broad consultation, the same way we did when we were crafting our constitution, where in private sector, labor, civil society made submissions. And if I remember very well, a majority of political parties, including opposition parties, embraced it and often refer to it. Hence, until 2030, it is still a reference point. Of course, come that time, there will have to be a review and extension. So the advent of GNU has not stopped this broadly embraced policy, which has its own weaknesses, because the review by HSRC and others have said we've fallen so much behind this policy. It was also based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals and many other things that formulated that particular policy. So until and unless we specify a particular aspect of the policy itself, of course, we're dealing with a changed geopolitical environment, a changed climate environment, a changed technology, AI environment, a changed immigration, migration environment of the world, and so forth. So policies will have to adjust. So that's the first of those. On the issue of proactive, intervention by the PSC, where political intervention to highlight loyalty over qualifications and competence. It's just that PSC has not communicated this. That's what we're already doing extensively. Even more recently, when we had the issue of a 22-year-old from social development being appointed chief of staff, which would have needed more qualification, more experience. PSC without waiting for anyone to approach on our own accord. We intervened. Every year, that's what we do. And whenever there are wrong appointments, and whenever systems of appointments are twisted, we have intervened. If we were to give you a litany or a list of those, you would be surprised. It's just that we do not go to the media for each one of those interventions. And we've taken, even on the most powerful ministers, and reversed, processes of appointment where they were not legal. So the issue of being proactive, it's what we would also be transplanting to the local government should the bill be passed, which has already been, supported by the National Assembly, and now the NCOP will be looking at. So on the issue of costs, that's the point that Advocate Makinde was saying, to say most of the people who come to us realize that well-funded departments who are able to just employ a senior counsel at the slightest provocation against a person who has been suspended unfairly and so forth, when they come to us, they pay nothing because we're a constitutional body and a public entity. And therefore, that victimization by departments merely because they have those war chests, it's what we have actually prevented, in the main. And many cases have been resolved, which could have cost the victims hundreds of thousands of legal consultations and legal representations. So that is what would then be brought in to say this Goliath approach where a department throws everything when in fact there is no basis. That's when we come in and try to mitigate. Now, let me hypothetically raise another issue here by the way of an indirect answering some of these issues. If you examine the recent SONA and you examine the current Madlanga Commission, the ad hoc committee, the standing committee, the ad hoc committee on the investigation, you realize what has been happening in our hospitals, what has been happening in Ekurhuleni in particular at this stage. And you begin to say, and the water crisis, increasingly the new white paper on local government, as well as the pronouncements by the president in SONA, they were saying, should this or that municipality fail, those functions, we should have mechanisms where provincial government should actually intervene on national government. Now imagine a situation where PSC is not in the space of local government to work hand in hand developmentally with the local government. They wait until things have collapsed and they are referred to the provincial or national government. That's when then we do oversight over that particular work, where we say, no, let's wait because we're not in the local government space until there is a collapse. And that is what the fragmentation that does not take the framers of the Constitution, which emphasized whenever they mentioned autonomy of some kind, cooperative governance, intergovernmental relations, where they are trying to say autonomy is not absolute, where sometimes a municipality A say, I'm autonomous in order to destroy whatever there is, where people start suffering in a sense. But where things are functioning well, you are less likely going to invite constitutional bodies such as your AG, which will simply be issuing all those clean audit reports, or the public protector, or the Human Rights Commission, or the Public Service Commission. So that in itself, I think is very important to say. The irony here would be to say, as the president, as the white paper is saying, intervene government when water is not coming to Hammanskraal. then we will be waiting as the PSC to say, let's wait until it gets to provincial level so that we monitor the performance. Because this is not just about labor issues, employment, and so forth. PSC's role is largely a developmental one, and we're shifting in that. And we want to partner with the entities so that they are able to be part of the journey itself. We're working with the departments, which we had indicated initially. They said we feared PSC because we thought PSC is here for fault finding. Instead, it's fact finding with the aim of partnership for development. And lastly, Chairperson, thanks for your indulgence. When we talk of a bargaining, arrangement, or we talk of the Municipal Finance Management, Act, we respect the laws which are already there. We do not say we are bringing PFMA into the space where PFMA is not applicable. We do not bring the national bargaining into the space. We say, since you have agreed on these laws, we want to also do oversight on whether you are applying them as you intended them to do. Hence, this notion of saying, but we have our own bargaining arrangements, it's sometimes a misnomer. Treasury has invited us to work closely on the issues of how to improve efficiency across government. More so for a country that is borrowing 2 billion rands per day. And that efficiency can then stop examining at a certain point because there is an absolutely defined autonomy. And PSC is playing a role that is complementary to the other oversight bodies, such as yourselves, which are also developmental in nature. We're saying we will partner with you, we will work with you. We are an extended arm of you. We are a creation of the legislatures in the provinces, a creation of parliament nationally. So we shouldn't be seen as autonomous as we are. Public protector is created by parliament. AG, to some degree, is created as such and accounts to parliament. So look at us as an extension and as a specialized tool in your hands, rather than something that will stand outside. And where there are constitutionally defined roles and autonomies, we are not there to encroach on those and say, now we are going to change things. We simply say, in the space which you have defined, just make things work better. If, for example, you have a province A which is under party B, they are the ones, together with the other parties, who are going to appoint that commissioner. It's not going to be centralized. It is the premier and the speaker of that province who is going to approach the president and say, we have decided on this one. So if it is GNU or PNU, it will be that PNU arrangement in the legislature. Of course, in this case, it involves all parties. So that is my submission here to say, let us look at this and say, what is the crisis that as a country we're trying to solve? And the Constitution had the foresight to say added responsibilities will come in. And indeed, when we look at all these Zondo Commission and the current challenges and so forth, and look at the public hearings and what people have been yearning for, anything to reinforce and be a multiplier to the accountability ecosystem, we should embrace it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. Kenny, Chairperson, if I may.
Over to you.
Chair, there's a few additional points that I'd like to make with regards to the comments you've raised. The first one deals with the inclusion of local government and the issue regarding us using the policy framework as justification for the inclusion of local government. I think it's important to note that the primary justification for the inclusion of local government within the sphere of the bill is not necessarily the policy considerations, but it stems from the Constitution. As the Commission, our reading of Chapter 10 is very clear. Section 195 of the Constitution, which deals with the constitutional values and principles, provides that those constitutional values and principles are applicable on all organs of state. And it is the responsibility and function of the Public Service Commission to monitor and promote those constitutional values and principles. So in section 195, you already see there's a reference to the role of the Public Service Commission across all spheres of government. That includes entities and that includes local government. And then if you analyze section 196 as a whole, you see that 196 does not only refer to public service. In some of the provisions, yes, it states public service, but it also refers to public administration. In fact, the heading of Chapter 10 is public administration. So the role of the Public Service Commission is broader than just the public service. It involves the public service, yes, but also includes public administration. And by definition, public administration includes municipalities and state-owned entities. And there's an interesting 1999 Constitutional Court judgment that actually involved the province of the Western Cape and the President of the Republic, and it related to the then provisions of the Public Service Act. And the court had an opportunity to delve into the issue of what is meant by public service and what is meant by public administration. And the court surmised that at the end of the day, one should not be led astray by the terminology that is used within Chapter 10. Because whether you're a public servant or a public administrator, you're still performing a public function funded by state funds to the good of citizens. And ultimately, the court reasoned that the intention behind Chapter 10 is merely to ensure that there is constitutional oversight over all spheres of government. And that constitutional oversight vests with the Public Service Commission. So our premise, our basis on which we advance the bill is not necessarily on the policy frameworks, but it's grounded in the provisions of Chapter 10 of the Constitution. And we firmly believe that Chapter 10, if read contextually, provides for an extended mandate of the Public Service Commission across all spheres of government. In addition to that, Chair, if one evaluates section 1964G of the Constitution, it also says that Parliament has the authority to allocate additional functions to the Public Service Commission. Now, there is a school of thought that says those additional functions are only ring-fenced to what is in section 1964. We disagree with that because the chapter must be read as a whole. It's not only 1964. You need to read Chapter 10 as a whole. And as I've indicated, Chapter 10 refers to public administration. So our reading of section 1964G is that there is nothing that prohibits Parliament from including additional powers and functions to the Commission based on its oversight role within public service and public administration, and thereby the inclusion of local government and state-owned entities is justified. Your second comment related to the issue of why haven't we prescribed the systems and the processes that must be involved in investigations, inspections, and inquiries. And it's a valid question. With legislation, it is often very difficult to include the nuts and bolts of every system and process because then the legislation becomes unwieldy. And also, processes and systems changed often. So the most reasonable manner in which to include these systems and processes is by virtue of regulations. It's one of the most common mechanisms utilized in legislation to ensure that systems and processes, etc., can be prescribed by virtue of regulations. In our bill, we speak about rules. In our current version of the Public Service Commission Act, the 1997 Act, it also speaks about rules. And we currently have those rules in place for inspections, inquiries, and investigations. And these are the systems and processes that we prescribe as to how an investigation or an inspection must unfold. And these rules are part and parcel of the Act, just as regulations must be read as part and parcel of a particular law. So the response that I will offer is that the rules will adequately provide for these investigation, inspection, and inquiry processes. We will then, where it needs to be supplemented, let's say the bill is implemented, we would need to supplement those rules with the addition of state-owned entities and municipalities. And obviously, we will follow the normal legislatively required process when we implement those specific rules. There will be a public consultation process, etc., where all stakeholders will have an opportunity to engage with us on the content of those specific rules. My chairperson has already dealt to an extent with the issue of appointment processes and unlawful appointment processes, as is indicated. The Commission as a whole has dealt with a number of instances where these matters have been brought to our attention. But as you've indicated in one of your comments, we must follow a fair process. We must follow the rule of law. And it doesn't mean that when an accusation or an allegation is leveled with us with regards to an irregular appointment, that we summarily issue an instruction or a directive that person A must be removed from their position. We then naturally follow the rules of natural justice and initiate an investigation. Subsequent to that investigation, we will make certain decisions. They can either be recommendations or they can be directives, the directives of which are binding. And as Prof has indicated to you, we have instances where senior officials within government have been irregularly appointed according to the view of the Public Service Commission. And one of the mechanisms that we use is to request that the relevant executive authority implement the processes within the relevant court to have that position overturned. And that's an important point that we need to raise, because even if an individual is appointed irregularly, they have still acquired certain rights, and those rights are must be respected. And the manner in which an irregular appointment must be dealt with is it must be overturned in the appropriate forum, which is in most instances either the Labour Court or the High Court. And we've in fact seen a situation within this jurisdiction where the Commission initiated an investigation with regards to the appointment of a individual on the SMS level. And we found that there was an irregularity in the appointment process, and the recommendation to the EA was that the appointment must be reversed and an approach to the court must be made. And that was eventually followed through by the EA. And in that particular instance, and it doesn't happen in all instances, it depends on the merits of a particular matter. But in this particular instance I'm referring to, the Labour Court decided that they will not overturn the irregular appointment due to the factors relevant in that particular issue. Most notably, the person did not participate in any nefarious activity. The oversight was administrative in nature, and the person had been in their position for more than 3 years, so it would have been unfair to reverse that appointment. But that is normally the process that is followed by virtue of the PSC's involvement. And as Prof said, we've got a litany of matters, not only on this, but in other areas where the impetus and the action of the Public Service Commission can be demonstrated. Chairperson, the one issue my Professor Fakeni already dealt with, the collective bargaining, but I understand that Advocate Makinde also wants to supplement that, so I'm going to ask her to deal with that issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I think the issue that I would like to talk to are the issue of collective bargaining that you have raised. You raised two issues. One is about the salary that was negotiated, and it led to they couldn't pay it, and they had to start reducing the salary and all of that. I will say, you know, the issue of collective bargaining, it's a labor law tool that is recognized. However, the role that we need to bring into municipality is to understand that, yes, municipality generate their own funding. And that is why they do the collective bargaining in such a way that different municipalities, they have different capacities. Grade A, grade B, grade C, and they negotiate differently and the salaries are not the same. However, while they are doing that, they must still understand that they are also providing public service. And within public service, there are needs that needs to be done. There is this budget shortfall everywhere where the country is borrowing. So it then becomes problematic if they have to also look at the MFMA, which then brings the risk of what we called irregular expenditure. So what has happened by experience in the public service, for example, is that when they negotiated the salary for 2020, 2021, and then it was a multi-year negotiation over 3 years, the first year they paid, the second year they couldn't afford it. Then they couldn't implement that salary negotiation. They went to court. The court then says, yes, there is a contract. However, if you don't have it in terms of the MFMA or the PFMA, it becomes an irregular expenditure if you pay it. So you need to take into account your budget as a public body, even though you are allowed to negotiate above that. But if you do that, that risk is either you are not going to pay it or you are going to have layoffs. And that's why in the private sector, they don't even bother if there is such a negotiation that is above salary. They simply start to do retrenchment in terms of Section 189. And in the public service, we don't do retrenchment that easily. So there has to be a balancing. And I think this is the skills and training that we need to bring into collective bargaining so that the unions themselves, they are social partners. And the government must also be accountable in terms of actually telling them, this is the MTEF budget. This is what is available. Let's negotiate within this bracket so that everybody works in harmony. I think what was lacking at that stage was this over-independence, not paying attention to available budget, not looking at resources that is coming in. Collective bargaining needs to be done within that context of what is the estimated income, where are we going to have these resources? Otherwise, it can be negligence in terms of the way we negotiate. And these case laws have said, yes, it is a contract, it's binding, but it will create physical instability. And it becomes an unfunded liability on government. And then we have to look at the consequence of that. And I think these are the type of leverages that we have to bring in. We cannot say it must be exactly the same salary, but it must be reasonable, affordable, not constituting physical liability. And I think the PSC will be looking into that in terms of saying there is a clause that used to be there in the olden days to say you don't budget unless Treasury has confirmed that there is that budget or so much so that you work within that bracket. I think we will be looking at that going forward and assisting that process. So that is the first issue of collective bargaining that you raised. Now, the second issue that you raised on collective bargaining is the way does the PSC comes in terms of people submitting their grievances and things like that. Like we have said, those grievances, everybody, each constituency in the PSCBC, local governments, SALGBC, all of them, they have their own internal grievance mechanism. The PSC is an external body. Whether it's 10 days, 30 days, you will have to follow all that procedure. So our rules will flash that out to say, in the local government, there is a similar process. They have a 5-stage municipal grievance process, often structured in the distinct tired steps, focus on escalating through line management to the municipal manager. So you will have to exhaust your internal processes. Only when you are finished with your municipal manager, you then opt whether you want to go to the bargaining council or you want to go to the PSC. So those resolution attempts and the HR involvement, you need to make sure that you've done that. And when you come, you can say to your EA or to your head of department, please refer my dispute. If they don't refer the dispute at that stage, you can refer it by yourself. And that is the way it is going to be working. As a constitutional body, the power is there in terms of constitution. It does not conflict with collective bargaining. It's just a recognition of there is an alternative route, a route that might be suitable for you if you choose to follow that route. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I do not see any hands. If I can ask the Western Cape legal advisor to comment, it would be it's also the next item on the agenda. I also would like to excuse the Public Service Commission and your representatives. You're welcome to stay on, but I would, but you are excused if I know you also have other work to do. We're going to now consider the Western Cape legal advisor. Is he present? Are she present?
I'm present, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members.
You notice I corrected myself when I said he. I immediately corrected myself. My apologies for that slip up. Over to you.
Chair, I am going to share my presentation. Many of the questions raised by members and many of the concerns that the members have, I have in fact addressed it in the presentation. So, Chair, I thank you for giving me this opportunity and for the members giving me this opportunity to actually present. And basically, Chair, I want to go into the rationale behind, the written comments. And, I want to present to this committee, the rationale behind the comments and how I arrived to certain conclusions. So, Chair, I present these comments on the Public Service Commission, and my analysis is grounded in constitutional text, but also on the broader constitutional purpose of ensuring effective public administration. Chair, what I realized is that there is a lot of conflict in interpreting this bill, and that conflict stems from the fact that there are two approaches to interpretations that is happening. Firstly, there is the textual approach that is happening. And the textual approach is when you look at a bill or piece of legislation and you look at the pure grammatical meaning of the legislation, and based on that, then you decide on the constitutionality and where it's placed within the Constitution. But if you look at a purposive interpretation, Chair, a purposive interpretation will look at the bill, they would look at the context of the bill and the aim that the bill intends to achieve. They'll look at it within the whole constitutional architecture and not as isolated clauses. And Chair, I wish to state to the members and this committee that the Constitutional Court actually favors the contextual purposive approach when trying to now interpret a piece of legislation. So, Chair, on the initial reading of this bill, I recognized or I identified several potential pitfalls or red flags. In particular, I was concerned about, and it's been raised before in the previous presentation as well by Advocate Makinda, and that was the extension of the PSC's oversight to local government, the strengthened independence and resemblance to a Chapter 9 institution, because on my initial view, it seemed like what the PSC was trying to do, even though they are Chapter 10, they were trying to expand, themselves to appear or to be a Chapter 9 institution. And the other one that raised a red flag is the summons and investigative powers. And I approached the bill cautiously, and I tested it both against the strict textual reading and the purposive reading. So in my presentation, I will present to you both sides of the argument and how that argument is resolved and reconciled. So when we look on the constitutional foundation of the PSC, it's established under sections 196 and 195 of the Constitution. So 196.1 provides for a single independence constitution, and 194 speaks to the independence and impartiality impartiality, excuse me. And then 196.4 sets out its powers. And then crucially, within 196.4 is 196.4G, which allows Parliament to confer additional powers by legislation. So the interpretive question here is whether the bill merely amplifies what Section 196 permits, or whether it stretches beyond the constitutional framework. So if we were to take a textual approach, then we were to focus on the wording and only on the wording of Section 196. And that would confine the mandate of the PSC only to 196. But if we look at a purposive approach, we ask, what is the Constitution trying to achieve through the PSC? And the answer to that question shapes the outcome. So, as I've mentioned before, Chair, the core issue is interpretive. I know us lawyers, you know, we like saying it depends, but it truly does depend. But my argument is placed on accepted practice within the Concord. And so we need to ask ourselves, does the Constitution limit the PSC strictly to the public service as historically understood? Or does it allow Parliament to expand oversight in order to give practical effect to Section 195 values? So I pause here also to mention, Chair, that when I use it within the narrow context of public administration and oversight or overseeing the work of public officials in the public sector. So it must be understood within that context. So a narrow textual reading would favor confinement, and a purposive reading would emphasize accountability across all spheres. So it ultimately hinges on which interpretive method is applied. And I will explain why a purposive reading is constitutionally stronger within this context. So traditionally, the PSC, the Public Service Act confined the PSC to national and provincial service structures, but the bill extends oversight to the broader concept of public administration, including municipality. So the critic would say, or a textual argument would say, that Section 196 refers to public service, therefore the mandate is confined. However, Section 195.3 expressly states that the basic values and principles of public administration apply to administration in every sphere. I think it was also Mr. Is it Seal that referred or touched on the same point. So a purpose of interpretation recognizes that the Constitution does not intend governance to be fragmented, and the bill aligns to PSC's oversight with the within the full constitutional reach of Section 195. But another crucial question and controversial question is that, does it violate municipal autonomy? So sections 151 and 153 protect municipal autonomy, but a textual objection will argue that extending PSC's oversight risks encroaching on local executive authority. However, oversight in this context is not equivalent to control. The PSC does not assume executive functions. It does not substitute municipal decision-making. It monitors compliance with constitutional values, and those values are found in Section 195. Under a purposive reading of cooperative governance, oversight mechanisms are intended to reinforce accountability, not erode autonomy. So the bill must therefore be understood within the architecture of cooperative governance. And here is the point on the Chapter 9 institutions that I alluded to earlier. The bill strengthens the independence reporting mechanism and administrative autonomy, but some might argue that it resembles a Chapter 9 institution and potentially alters the PSC's constitutional character. Textually, however, the PSC remains located in Chapter 10 of the Constitution. There is no constitutional amendment. Section 196 4G already allows Parliament to enact legislation that extends its mandate. So there is no reclassification. And from a perspective, independence is necessary for credible oversight. The resemblance is structural. It's not constitutional between the two bodies. It strengthens the functionality without altering the constitutional placement. And Chair, there is an issue that you've raised, which I thought was very important, and I did already include it in the presentation. And that is the summons powers. You raised the summons powers, if I'm not mistaken, Chair, summons powers, investigations, and compliance reporting, I think, if my memory is correct. So the term summons, it raises concerns because it appears to be a judicial concept. So on this aspect, similar to Section 56 of the Constitution, where the Parliament can summon, it is akin to that power, it's similar to that power. It's not judicial in any way. It respects the respects the separation of power aspect. It mirrors the oversight mechanism. It does not create a judicial authority, and the purpose is to compel cooperation to ensure effective investigations. And the power must be interpreted in light of the oversight functions, not in isolation from this context. So I'm getting to the investigations and inspections. So, Chair, the 2 points that you raised were quite correct. There is a difference between inspections and investigations. There actually is case law in this regard. So inspections are routine compliance assessments, but investigations, they have to be circumscribed more narrowly because natural justice demands that narrow laying out of what the inspectors are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And that is because it touches on issues of privacy, it touches on various other constitutional rights. So I have noted the comments by the professor in regards to the rules that will speak to the issue of investigations. If the rules are sufficiently lay out what investigations exactly entail, then it would satisfy this requirement of the investigations have to be circumscribed quite clearly. The one issue that is not so controversial is the prior compliance. And basically what the bill is saying that it aligns with PIA, it allows disclosures subject to statutory safeguards, it predicts confidentiality, and basically that the framework will work within the law. It's not really, you know, something that I will dwell on quite long. So, Chair and honorable members, it would be incorrect for me to suggest that this bill is free from controversy, as I have mentioned before. The extension to municipalities will attract resistance. The strengthened independence may raise concerns and the summons powers may be understood. It's very important for me to be forthright to this committee about that there will potentially be some challenges to this. And the objections, you know, considering what approaches to be taken are legally arguable. However, when the Constitution is interpreted purposefully, in light of Sections 195's commitment to accountable governance, the bill remains within constitutional bounds, and that is, you know, ultimately view, but it does, and I recognize that it does ultimately turn on interpretive approaches that will be taken. So in conclusion, I will say that the bill represents Parliament exercising, it hinges on Parliament exercising its authority under 196(4)(G). It does not amend the Constitution. It does not reclassify the PSC into Chapter 9. It does not override municipal autonomy. It strengthens oversight mechanisms to give practical effect to constitutional values. The constitutionality of the bill hinges on interpretation, and in my considered view, a purpose-served, context-sensitive reading supports in its validity. And that is all from my side, Chair. I have tried to keep it brief and to the point, and I anticipate that there will be some questions around this.
Thank you very much. And yes, I think you found some of the words that I was struggling to find with my a little bit of first and second year legal knowledge from more than 30 years ago. So thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions, any inputs from the committee members? I'm taking hands now. Gone. Well, thank you very much. Also, you're more than welcome to stay on, but you are excused. We are now going to, as a committee, deliberate on the matter. So
thanks very much, Chair. I hope my submissions were helpful in some way.
I found it very helpful. As I said, I had to scratch into the mist of my memory of things I studied years ago. But I think the key points that are here, it's the different interpretive approaches, the textual, the interpretive, context-dependent interpretation. I think the other key point is that you also addressed you also touched on some of the concerns that I certainly share. I think a lot of it is going to depend at the end of the day whether we create good legislation. Good legislation and constitutional legislation isn't necessarily the same thing, but that's what we need to deliberate on as a committee. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, both.
Colleagues, we've heard the inputs from the Public Service Commission, and we heard the inputs from the legal advisor of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, or our relevant legal advisor. I took a stab myself. This is now my personal attempt at take a stab at a initial negotiation mandate. Mrs. Kamishka Ahmad, if it's possible for you to flight what I've drafted, and I submit this to the committee as a possible position for us to consider, and I'm putting it forward for your consideration, an attempt at a resolution. So over to you, Mrs. Kamishka Ahmad. So colleagues, I'm just going to take you, this was after reading all the inputs of the documents that were sent to us, I'm going to just take you through it. And Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you can just scroll, thank you very much. And if you can just scroll as I go through it. Right, it's the report, the proposed report that we, with amendments, will either adopt or not adopt. It's the report on the Standing Committee for Premier and Constitutional Development on the Public Service Commission Bill B30/2023, dated 18 February 2026, as follows. Well, I'm not going to read every single word, but having considered the subject of the bill referred to in accordance with Rule 217 confers on the Western Cape's delegation and the NCOP the authority to not support the bill in its current form, and proposes amendments as reflected in this report. Now, I made some general remarks. The committee notes that the bill aims to regulate the Public Service Commission in accordance with the provision of the Constitution, Section 195 and Section 196 of the Constitution. The committee welcomes any legislation that truly gives effect to the Constitution and actively promotes its values. So the intent is honourable. However, it is to be noted that the legislative intention is not the same as fit-for-purpose legislation itself, and the committee views its role as helping to ensure a legislative framework to practically give effect to the relevant constitutional clause. The extent of such a fit-for-purpose legislative framework goes far beyond the Public Service Commission Bill under consideration, even when including the Public Service Amendment Bill and the Public Administration Management Bill previously considered by the committee. So there's a legislative backdrop and a context that we need to consider. The committee furthermore notes that despite the existence of our constitution, South Africa has experienced multiple instances of the institutions of our constitutional democracy being subverted in the past few decades. Can use a number of examples, but I believe committee members are aware of that. And I perhaps should point out this applies to any political party in power. We're not making legislation for one political party. We make legislation that applies to any political party. The net effect of such instances of subversion has been deeply damaging to the rule of law, service delivery, employment and economic growth, the notion of a capable state, and the proper use of state resources. To resolve these negative impulses and its continued negative consequences for the country, the committee is of the view that solutions need to consist of comprehensive and ongoing reform, as partial reform is easily subverted in an anti-constitutional constitutional ecosystem set in place to become part of such an ecosystem. So in other words, partial reform can easily subverted. We need to get to the symptoms, not just the causes. The above is an important context that informs the committee's assessment of the possible real effects of the proposed bill. The committee also views the proposed Public Service Commission bill in the context of other provisions of the Constitution, particularly in relation to the powers of the different spheres of government. Now, here's some specific remarks and proposals. In terms of Clause 9, the committee notes that the Commission has a fair amount of discretion as to which department and entities should be subject to inspections or inquiries. The committee believes that a clause needs to be inserted. The Commission must report on and keep an official record of all inspections and inquiries, and reasons should be given for why it occurred, or alternatively, why it did not occur. Now, there was an argument you heard that it's covered in rules and regulations. However, there's nothing wrong with inserting a clause that obliges rules and regulations to keep this into account. In addition, we believe that a specific proactive clause needs to be inserted to include the prevention of cadre deployment. The appointment of, and I attempted to define it as the appointment of government officials through political influence of political parties or its members outside of the parameters of law and due process by any political party in such inspections and inquiries. Lastly, we believe that the basic inquiry or inspection process itself should be outlined or defined in the bill itself to ensure due process, as court challenges are both expensive for the taxpayers and may cause bottlenecks in implementation. Colleagues, if the rules and regulations if there's not a standard set for it, rules and regulations can be bad, and we can end up with a situation where it actually confuses the picture more than anything else. Clause 10, similarly, Commission has a fair amount of discretion as to which grievances should be investigated, and the committee believes the clause must be inserted that the Commission must report on and keep an official record of all grievances and investigations. A reason should be given for why it occurred, or alternatively, why it did not occur. In addition, we believe that a specific proactive clause needs to be inserted to include the prevention of cadre deployment, the appointment of government. Again, I'd use the similar definition by any political party in such investigations. Lastly, believe the basic investigation process itself should be outlined or defined in the bill itself to ensure due process, as court very similar point to the one I made before. And then clause 14, the committee notes the laudable objective for the commission to be independent and impartial. However, we believe a clause needs to be inserted in section 40 or alternatively section 15 that outlines minimum criminal penalties similar to other clauses in the bill for commission members or its employees who abuse office. It's elsewhere, but it doesn't, on the face of it, apply to the commission members itself. Colleagues, there is one amendment that I would like to propose as well, is that I do not believe the point that I made about employers was sufficiently addressed. I did not raise it in the context of the collective bargaining process itself. I raised it in the context of collective bargaining processes that does not take into account the budgetary processes, that doesn't take into account local dynamics, and then afterwards there is a impact on service delivery and employees that can only be resolved through court action, and that has caused disruption in the Western Cape and elsewhere. I believe a clause should also be inserted that extends the ability to go to the Public Service Commission to employers if the impact of collective bargaining has a detrimental effect on service delivery and budgets. So I would like to propose that amendment. And then in conclusion, the committee does not support the Public Service Commission Bill B30 2023 at this stage. Colleagues, it will come back to us, and if our concerns have been accommodated, we can revisit our support for this matter. The committee believes that this legislation needs to be constitutionally tested along with the Public Service Amendment Bill and the Public Administration Bill. Colleagues, this is what I submit as an attempt to guide the committee in this regard. I will take hands now and comments from members. Member van Minnen.
Thank you very much. Yes, no, I agree with it. I also second your amendment, and yes, I'm in full agreement therewith. Thank you.
Member Sayed.
No, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, no, I note, but I just want the minority view of the ANC to be noted, that we support the bill in its entirety, yeah, without these amendments. Thank you. Without these proposals. Thank you.
As Kamish Ahmad, if you can ensure that that is reflected, and then Member Heron.
No, thanks, Chair. I don't want to go through all your general remarks and the specific remarks. I find if we can go down to the concluding resolution 2, doesn't make sense to me that I don't understand the rational basis for raising constitutionality when our own legal advisor said it is, in her view, constitutional. And there is a second legal opinion that was sent to us that said it is constitutional. So how does a committee that's received advice that the bill is constitutional still hold a view that it's not? I mean, it's like a personal view, but it's not based on any legal advice. The legal advice is actually contrary to what we're saying.
Any other comments? I don't see any other hands. There's in the legal advice that we received now, there were 2 comments made, which I think substantiates point number 2. One is that we were advised that a legal opinion is not the same as a legal judgment. It's a legal opinion, right? And we are not automatically bound by a legal opinion. And part of the opinion indicated that very firmly that it is an opinion, not a judgment. And then secondly, in the second submission that we received, the comment was made, there was a particular interpretive approach. And if such an interpretive approach is taken, then it is constitutional. It did not dispense in its entirety with the argument that there are constitutional concerns. In fact, it is, the comment was made that there is room for potential tension. And I'm of the view that there's one way to settle that, and that is to constitutionally test the matter. That is my response. Of course, we are entirely, in our committee, we are entirely free to disagree with one another. Member Aaron, if I can have an indication, do you have a minority view on this particular report as well that should be reflected?
Yes, Chair, I do have, and I would second Honourable Syed's position that the bill be supported. I do want to come back and say, obviously, a judgment and an opinion are two different things. But a committee making a resolution after having received advice that the bill is probably constitutional, and now saying that we don't believe it is. I mean, what is the rational basis for saying that? I mean, the legal advisor couldn't have been clearer. The second, the legal opinion they got from senior counsel, which was submitted, is a legal opinion. It is a legal opinion, but you hold a view that it needs to be tested constitutionally. But I want to understand what informs that.
Member Aaron, I actually believe I've responded, and I've situated my response very much in the legal opinions that have been given to us. It's on record here. It was in the legal opinion. We were advised that it is, if you take an interpretive response, then it is constitutional. However, it pointed out that there are points of potential tension. And secondly, I think I also made the point, there's one way to settle that concern, the concern that you have and what I have. Well, I know the point of difference between the two of us, and that is to actually have a judgment. So I don't believe it's irrational. And also, can I just, if you can just scroll, Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you can just scroll to the bottom again. We're expressing the opinion that it needs to be constitutionally tested. We're not expressing the opinion that is unconstitutional. So it's also it's a concern that exists, and we believe that the judgment will actually settle that concern. And I think that is really my thinking. Mr. Vermeulen, I see your hand.
Hi, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Just a quick point, maybe 2 points. I see there, clause 14, there just needs to be a space there, if you don't mind, Chairperson Wosima, between clause and the 14, just a space. Do you see that? Not there, to go left. Between the clause, the E and the 1, or the 14. Yeah, there we go, there we go. Chairperson, then just a question. The committee mentions here under conclusion that it does not support this bill at this stage. That's all good and well, great. But then also, Osima, if you just scroll up right to the top of the report. I'm just wondering, Chairperson, I'm just putting it to you in the committee as a question of style. Do you think that it might be better if you see after this first introductory, it says as follows, ... Then the standing committee for Premier, it says having considered, it says it gives the authority not to support the bill, and then it mentions the minority party views. Do you think that these two paragraphs, Chairperson, I'm thinking that it may be good to put them right at the end after the committee has made its whole argument, and just to move both of them down after the committee has made its whole argument under that conclusion where you have. Just might just flow better. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, as you were speaking, I was thinking the same thing. I don't want the minority views to be in the text. It actually belongs at the end, that it's reflected in the final decision of the committee, and I think that makes more sense to me as well. Can I then ask? And good. Okay, it has been included in terms of Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress, and good expressed its minority view to support the bill. Colleagues, so that is the proposed report. I just want to also be, so if I can put the report as amended, and also the point that I made about, there was also an amendment that I proposed.
Chairperson?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm being, but I don't want to be rude.
No
another,
problem.
Another remark quickly, just through you to Wasima. It might be better, Wasima, to put point 3 as point 2, because then it follows the committee's decision. Then both of those two opinions, the committee's decision and they're together. Then you have point 3. That's what my suggestion would be. Thank you, Chairperson.
I think those are very well spotted. So in terms of the amendment that I proposed there is that I'm just trying to find the right words now, that that the employer's right subsequent to a collective bargaining process to approach the Service Commission should also be contained in the legislation. Colleagues, so we have the minority views reflected in the report. So let me first put we've had a discussion as to the negotiation mandate itself. Now I would like to have the committee report as amended, reflecting the minority views. I would like to put it to the committee. We had a proposal to adopt the report with its amendments. We had a minority views expressed. Now the report itself I'm putting to the committee for adoption. Can I have a proposer, please? I see Member Johnson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I propose the adoption of the report with amendments.
And if I can ask for a seconder.
I second, Chairperson.
I see Member Boyson. Member van Minen, I take it you wanted to second. Am I correct?
I did indeed, but I was beaten to the post by Member Boyson.
Okay, 100%. Colleagues, then on the next item, are there any particular resolutions, any other resolutions or recommendations that the committee would like to take? I do not see any hands gone. Then colleagues, then if I can ask Ms. Kamish Ahmad, are there any other matters that we need to deal with the committee? Sorry, I can't hear.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We have no other business, Chairperson. Thank you.
There are no other matters. Colleagues, with those words, thank you very much for your availability. The meeting is concluded.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
you.